Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Nice to see you, cousin.
Nice to see you too.
Where you at? Where are you joining us from? Or joining me from?
I'm joining from Houston, Texas.
Houston. Cool. For Thanksgiving, huh?
Yes.
Very nice. Are you guys busy? Are you guys starting to prepare meals?
Mostly most of us have been coming into the house, so
Okay.
we're just kind of getting settled in, and then later, I guess food will happen tomorrow. So
All right. Houston's not too far from Corpus, is it?
4 hours away, I
Four
guess.
hours? I thought it was a lot closer than that.
No, it's like 4 hours, especially with traffic and things like that.
Yeah. I guess living in the valley, I never had to go to Corpus first before going to Houston, so I never knew how much, how long it is by
Mhm.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm happy that I'm gonna have a little bit of time to rest because I'm always juggling stuff, so I feel like it adds to how I feel per day.
Yeah.
But I guess I could explain more about that later when you ask me questions.
Yeah. Let me see if I can switch this view here. One second.
Hopefully, there won't be too much interruptions because they're uh, out and about over on the
Oh yeah,
side.
no worries at all. Let
Hope
me
that the sounds won't impact too much.
let me have could I have you a little more centered? Could you move your
Oh,
computer the other way?
yeah,
There you go.
'cause I'm using my iPad, so it's like
Oh,
kind
nice. Yeah. Just just a little slightly more to the opposite side, to the window side. Yeah, there you go.
there we go. Oh,
There you go. Awesome. It's so nice to see you, by the way. I know it's been a while.
yeah, it has been.
I think last time we chatted, it was at least this way, was whenever we had like a little mini family gathering, get together around the Christmas time, actually, right? Around this time.
Yeah,
Was it
last
last
year.
year?
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's when we were finding out about your diagnosis.
Yes.
Can you
So
believe it's already been about a year since you shared that news?
yeah, it has been a year. It's really it's I don't know. I guess it feels slightly surreal in the thought process of it because um it feels like it was just like yesterday, but at the same time, it feels like it's been a bit of time already.
Yeah.
Um, and like thankful that it's gone away, but it just hit me like, more so in September that, it's like been a year
Yeah.
um going through it because I was starting to notice last September notable signs of like swelling in my neck. And I didn't fully understand why. I was like, this is really strange. Um, Before that, I mean, there was inklings where, uh, a gynecologist had noticed a little bit of like swelling in my neck in the past. And she asked for like um, some scans to see like if it was anything or what it could be that why it was kind of swollen. And there didn't seem to be too much concern, but it was something like, oh, it might be best to check back on it later. Um, and I just didn't really think about, oh, this should be checked on later.
Yeah.
Um, and it didn't seem to grow, at least in my point of view, until that last year where it grew really quickly.
Okay.
Um, and that was where it was like, okay, let's start doing tests and trying to figure out what was going on. so many
This had
different.
never happened to you, obviously, before. You didn't have a symptom like this before, right?
Well, I had fatigue. I had certain symptoms that were leaning towards lymphoma, but there's not anything really noticeable that was like that would be like pinpointed to lymphoma before the extreme swelling happened. Because there's not something that like they can look in the they can kind of look in the bloodstream and say, oh yeah, it's abnormal now because they are aware of that I've had it. So they know, okay, this is her abnormal when she had lymphoma. This is not, you know. But before then, there's not really something that distinctly like an illness would be like, oh yeah, she's, has could do a test specifically and go, oh yeah, she has this. It has to be like, do scans, do, biopsies, things like that to really pinpoint what I had. And it was not like so easy, like in comparison to another kind of, like, I guess if you were doing some kind of test and you go, okay, you just take a little swab and then you check it and something like that. But even then, that's not easy. It just seems easy in my point of view in comparison because there was so many different scans and biopsies that it took so long for them to figure it out. So that was the frustration.
Okay, so you were starting to take all that testing around September last year. By when did you know, and by when were you told by a doctor, Christy, you have lymphoma?
It was kind of near December, but it was not like confirmed. They couldn't tell me exactly if it was lymphoma, if it was what kind of lymphoma. It seemed very likely. But because where it was in my neck, they were really scared at radiology associates to grab enough material because they could potentially hit another area. And that would be clearly, obviously, much worse scenario than just, grabbing some samples. So they kept thinking, oh, we can do it, small with, a fine needle incision and try to get stuff out. But every time they did, it was still very small amount for them to really gather enough information for them. And so it took till like December for them, like early December, for them to do a biopsy in the hospital for them to get enough of sample to be able to go, okay, we know it's lymphoma, what kind of lymphoma, etc. And they were able to provide what I needed. And at that same time, they put my port in just in case I would need it.
So wow. And when you find out, and I think, I mean, I've thought about this before, whenever you shared the news and I found out about it, I think when the family also found out about it, I think it kind of forces you, at least on the outside, the people who are not going through this, to kind of try to imagine, what you're going through, because most of us have not experienced something like that. I mean, I know my aunt, or our aunt Nidia, had breast cancer, is my understanding. But I didn't even know she had it, or she had gone through all that. I mean, I was really ignorant, maybe because I was living abroad, but I just didn't know until you had shared your news. And so then that's how I found out my aunt had also gone through something like that. And then so it makes you think, your loved ones, your family members are suffering through something that it's really scary, I can imagine. What was your thought process and how were you feeling? Because again, I just can't imagine having to receive that news, and then where do you get your strength to kind of battle it? Because it takes a lot, I imagine.
Yeah, for me, it was, to me, I felt was kind of strange because I knew I was gonna have it, weirdly. The reason why I say that is because my grandmother from my dad's side had lymphoma already. And that was my first, I guess, awareness of lymphoma as a cancer. I didn't really know much about it. Um, I'd seen, stories about leukemia, about other kinds of sicknesses from TV shows, movies, things like that. Most notably, Chasing Life was a TV show that really impacted me. And it was right around also that time period too. And so I was wanting to watch that because I wanted to know how it felt to experience that, to have a better understanding of what my grandmother was dealing at a time. And I didn't realize that eventually at that moment would be the, like, me helping myself know what to do when the time came of getting it. And I knew automatically I was going to be different from what most, or at least what it seemed to be most cancer survivors that would want to hide the fact that they have it for a while. I just wanted people to know. I wanted people to be able to go, here's what I'm dealing with, straightforward. What can we do? I'm going to be doing this, etc., etc. And also, it helped knowing that I could find resources online from credible places, specifically the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, that really talk about survivorship. Because for me, I've been, and I think a lot of people have seen in the media a somewhat screwed aspect about cancer. Thankfully, yes, we've there are cases in situations that it's different, and that is with me. But also yes, there are people that get the worst and die. But in many cases, there are far more survivors that have go through this long survivorship that don't get noticed. They're not seen in stories as much because it's quick to say. Half of it, I think, is because we have advanced, so now we have more treatments, and therefore there is more survivorship. But I also feel like it's also because there is so much sadness in portraying that, if you have cancer, you're more likely to die. And it's still always a possibility, and no matter what. But in the process of it, I've learned that there's so many different types of cancers and certain types of treatments, and that there are some where, yes, it's terminal and, you can die pretty quickly, or you might die a little bit after, potentially, more likely. And then there's other cases where you go through it and it's painful and it's so difficult, but eventually it's actually this much longer journey, because you're having to constantly come back and check again and make sure that you don't have it. because you could have to do the whole process all over again. And it's a much longer journey because you're constantly wondering if you might get it again. But you can live through it. It's not like there's some cancers where it is terminal, and then there's other ones that aren't, but it's not seen enough that way. So people go, cancer? Oh my gosh, how are you going to survive that? Because it's always seen as a death sentence versus a long-term illness.
That's that's a that's a perspective I hadn't necessarily heard. I mean, I know there are obviously a path to survivorship, as you mentioned, but the fact that you were already thinking that way because of your grandmother, you were kind of exposed, you were knowledgeable, right? So did that help you not feel so alone? That you felt like you didn't have to fight this alone, or that there were other people out there too who shared a little bit of what you were living through?
Yes, it kind of helped me to kind of know, okay, there's others out there dealing with it. The only times where it felt um, kind of alone was just because I still felt like I couldn't find a lot of people my age. I knew they existed, but they were farther away. And there's ways that you can communicate through Zoom, certain meeting aspects. But I was always very like, oh, well, I don't know if that's something where it's part of like a service, or like how do I get in and find these people specifically. And then there's also people their own journeys. They might not want to be in a Zoom meeting, and or how much strength they have to do so, to do that. But when I was going through treatments, everybody else was older than me. So I felt like singled out in some cases in those situations. But because, as I brought up before, Chasing Life, she was young when she got it. So it was like the one of those times where I was like, oh, she's, college age, or like just finished college, figuring out work and things like that. And then she was hit with this news: she has leukemia, and what she was going to do about that, alongside trying to be a reporter and trying to live her life, and how she was interacting with other people. And so that was I had that background from it, and then my knowledge from searching, because I was curious. I needed to know more about what it was going through. And so I researched on my own, and then I was going through the society's page of resources that they had. I had my own counselors that I have that are, affordable, that I get through my former university. So I had that also resource that was additional to my treatments, that were 100% valuable. And I will always recommend that, because I don't think I would have been in the right mindset, going through it if I hadn't had those resources. But then also, near kind of midway so into it, I was noticing on my another favorite TV show that was currently airing at the time, Superman and Lois, had another storyline with cancer storyline, but for her it was breast cancer. So Lois Lane was experiencing breast cancer, and being a mother, and all these other things that were happening, being, the wife of Superman and everything. So it was very inspiring to see that in a superhero type of story, and how real they shared that story, and they didn't make it so it was like, a quick fix, or but at the same time, I was rooting for her to have a survivorship story, because I didn't want it to be something where, oh, it's a terminal story. And so um, I felt that was another instance where I was like, oh, look, she's doing similar things that I've done already. I recognized it more so in that moment. In the past, it was more of like, from trying to find out how is that experience. And in that moment, I was actually, oh, I've been doing that. I've seen this. I know that they're doing it accurately because I've experienced it. And just seeing her do, ringing the bell, and I got to do it too. And so it it hits in a different way. So it was really so I as a writer, fiction writer, and I had journalism experience, like all those kind of things just have blended into my experience with connecting and finding ways to get strength. But even then, I've had moments in fighting lymphoma where I like, it was scary. I had a period of time during my chemo where I had what I call a loopy episode. My electrolytes were out of whack in some way, and it caused delirium in, and they said it was also kind of a side effect of the chemo as well. And I had to go to the hospital. So having that experience was also scary, because it was almost like I was like, I was responding in a really strange way, and my parents were like freaking out because they never seen me respond in this way. And so that was where the scariest, I think. And then just dealing with the pain and trying to get through it as best as possible. But a lot of the other stuff was just trying to get through it, because I knew I was going to be able to survive it. There were moments where I would get scared about it, like, what if, like, it's too much for me or whatever. I've always been slightly scared of death, but it was just something where it was a reminder of that. But at the same time, I knew it was something like I was going to survive this. Like, there's no other possibility.
I'm I'm glad the shows got it right, as you were saying, and it's refreshing to know that how important those sort of episodes of those shows are to portray things accurately, but also just the fact that they were part of the show, because it does educate people, and at the same time, it is like, I at least am reassured that there are people there that are going through it, who they could be touched and helped. Because, obviously, if I watch it, I haven't gone through it, I can't necessarily relate. But now that you bring it up, and next time I see a show and they're addressing lymphoma, for example, I'm going to be paying attention a lot closer, because now I have a family member. And I know I'm running out of time here on my Zoom, but just to kind of wrap things up, I do appreciate you sharing what you're going through, and part of the emotional process and the stages. And hopefully, and the reason why I wanted to do this was that if somebody is going through it in the early stages, or goes through it later on in life, that they're aware that, one, you can survive, two, there are resources and ways to cope, and that it's important that we know more about it, so that if you are in a position of power, either whether you have financial power, whether you have some sort of influence on social media, if you have anybody listening to you, really, to do anything about this this cancer or any cancers, that we can obviously share the word. We could bring shed light onto the issue. Oh, I'm sorry, those are the dogs that I have in the background. Sorry. Give me just a second. I think the mailman's here. 1 second. Shh, come on. All right. I'm gonna let them come in. So again, and the reason what kind of got me to do this, as you see, I have some facial hair here, and I kept hearing about No Shave November growing up. I think the trend kind of started fading away, and I heard it again because November was coming, and I thought about you, to be honest, and I was like, you know what? I felt for the first time when you shared your story about a year ago that I was like, oh my God, there's somebody who I care about who's going through something really tough that I don't necessarily understand. And so by me kind of like doing the No Shave November, it's also allowed me to kind of have an excuse to talk to you again and to really get to hear more about it. And so I appreciate you doing that. And hopefully by sharing this, somebody can relate and also either help or feel like they can get help if they're going through this, right? So
Yeah, I truly agree with that. And um, it's also really helpful because, um, like, for example, the society that I keep bringing up, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, they're when you donate to them, it helps to provide resources for people who are going through it, caretakers, but also funds towards research. So even in the process of me going through the fight of lymphoma, I was noticing updates where they were saying so and so treatment was coming because people had donated and they had put support into research. And if it weren't for that, there wouldn't be better treatments for people that are fighting and more towards trying to find ways to make it not happen to a lot of people. But that's still so far away. It's more of like, it's hard to prevent it. So now it's just really what we can do because that's so far away. It's more of what can we do it so it's not as painful, not as difficult for people. It's still hard, but there's new and more treatments and the ways that the treatments are happening that, like, I was worried I was going to be like very nauseous and throwing up all the time, and I didn't. So I was a little bit nauseous, but it wasn't the amount where it was so much that I was losing a lot of weight or anything. And so I looked very weirdly normal, except the losing of the hair. So it was things like that that you think it's going to be this, but then when you go through it, it's completely, each person has their own experience because each body has a different way of it responding to the treatment. Whatever treatment you're getting, it might be different drugs, whatever it may be, what you're going through, and then also the mindset you're in. So it's something where you can give somebody advice and that can help, but there's still going to be things that you have to figure out as you go along. So but overall, I think it's so important for people to be aware of it so they can donate, because I think a lot of times people are more aware of, and because of how everybody has rallied around breast cancer because it's pink, in October. But there's, a lot of other cancers that are different months, different colors. And the more that we can bring awareness to that, more people will be aware that, there is survivorship, there is opportunities to support towards making that change. And then there's also the cancer moonshot that that has been put in place as well to try to work towards. So there's
That's
so
awesome.
much in place, but there's always chances to be able
Yeah.
to grow and support others in some way.
Well, Christy, I applaud you. I have so much admiration for you, so much respect. You're a warrior that keeps on battling the next major, war, and you keep coming out, a champion. So I have so much respect for you, and I admire your writing as well. You're a published author with novels and a collection of poems, and it's really awesome to
And
have. Oh,
too.
what was that?
And a nonfiction book too.
And a
That's
nonfiction book too. So plugging that in there for whoever's looking at that, so they can look for Christina Vourcos, and all of your titles there, because I know you pour a lot of energy and a lot of heart into that, and I can imagine it also is therapeutic for you too, going through this cancer battle, and I'm so glad.
hard for me to focus on mental health too, because it impacts so many others, especially writers. And so that has been a way for me to kind of remind ourselves as writers or whoever, to care for ourselves beyond just our physical health, because especially as creatives, it's hard to um, we think we have to produce oh so much, and sometimes it is because financially and things like that, but it's not as easy for our minds to be able to create something like creating a phone where you can put the pieces together. They might be easily accessible, but with
Right.
your mind, it's hard to know, okay, are you going to be feeling all right today?
Mhm.
How do you feel better to be in the right mind space?
Yeah.
um, and then if you're going through like lymphoma, it hits you in a different way because now you have brain fog sometimes, and how do you control that? When is the best time to do it? So it's not just the time that you are available. Now it's, when do you actually feel good to be able to write? And
Yeah.
can you produce what you want to produce at the time you want? It can be frustrating. And it's also connected to a lot of chronic illnesses and long-term illnesses where, and it's notable lately with COVID have been happening with brain fog as well, of people realizing there's this thing that they don't know why, they're feeling more fatigued, more. And I was noticing that too. And I was like, what's going on? And there's so many different similar symptoms that other people might have. And that's also was tricky too for me, of knowing what I had too, because other people have similar. And it was like, what is it? But once you test and you feel like you went through all these routes, there's only could be this or this. And so, and there's a lot of people that have just chronic fatigue and brain fog that is, they don't even know where it's coming from. And they have to work through that. And
Yeah.
some people can't. And it's like a huge shift for them. So it's just, to me, it's given me this opportunity to not only fight for lymphoma and people that have fought lymphoma, but also mental health in general,
Mhm.
and how it's so important in connection to fighting physical illnesses
Yeah.
like cancer. So
Because you have
it,
to
it
be kind of like in the right state of mind as well to better yourself physically. I mean, a lot of how your state of mind is will affect your body.
mhm.
You're so right in saying that, because you treat cancer physically and with using radiation and all these treatments, but that doesn't include the mental health aspect. Yeah, you're so right about that.
Yeah. And so
Um,
I found, affordable resources, and I had, affordable insurance, but not everybody does. So that's why there's also, the society also provides sometimes funds for those who can't afford it. There's other locations where they might be able to help. But I just can't imagine somebody that can't afford, certain treatments, scans, whatever it may be, because of money. And it's because of that, they have it worse, or they're not able to survive because they haven't gotten the resources. So I'm thankful for what I was able to have in the time that I had. But I do realize there are so many others that still have much more burdens to hold, because they financially it's much harder for them.
Well, it speaks volumes when you say that, because it means that you're humble. So another awesome trait that you have. Christy, thank you so much for taking your time before Thanksgiving to join me to talk about this, to open up. And I'm so glad that you're doing this publicly, because you're allowing somebody who you may not even know to relate, to listen, and maybe learn something. So thank you again. I'm running out of time here, so I'm gonna stop this. I don't pay the premium Zoom, so got like 2 minutes left or so.
Okay.
So anyway, but thank you again, and hopefully
always wanted to just stop it and do it again, and it creates
we could. Yeah, we could, and just add another
it's
piece.
whatever you want to say.
Also, nowadays people's attention span is also really short. So
Yeah,
anyway.
and then I have the chemo curls that everybody talks about.
Oh wow. Okay. See, I didn't know that was the thing, the curl part. But yeah, your hair is growing pretty fast.
It's usually, they always talk about the first part most of the time, that going through the chemo stuff, not as much about recovery, of how the hair comes back. You can see it if you search for it, but just looking for it because I was like, I can't wait until my hair comes back, because that was such a big thing for me. Thankfully I had hats that I liked, and I was wearing those all the time, because I don't.
That's the cool thing. You have excuses to get hats and do something fun with the situation, I guess. Say hi to your parents for me, and happy Thanksgiving, okay?
All right, you too.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Bye.